Hey, in this video, I'm going to go through the steps for setting up a guide track to do a multi-panel video recording of a piece of music. I'm going to be doing Dragon Slayer with my students, so I'm going to go through the process of doing that in a series of videos here. First step is getting my guide track ready to send out to my students. So I've got Cakewalk by BandLab open here, and that is a free software. You can find the link to where to get it in the description below. And I'm going to go ahead and get my file set up. I'm going to do new from the file menu because I think that's a little bit better because I can specify where my files go. It helps me keep organized. I have a folder for my school already, and here I've already done some worksheets for my kids, so I've already got a Dragon Slayer folder. So I'm going to go ahead and put this in there, and I'm going to name this Dragon Slayer panel video. I already know my tempo, so I'm going to go ahead and set it here, but it could be set later on, also not too big of a deal, and basic is fine for a template. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK, and it's going to get my project started. First step is I'm going to need to set up a metronome, and you can see that 140 is already my tempo, so I could change it here if I'd forgotten to do that earlier. In another video, I had showed you how to get your metronome click as an audio track. I'll put the link in the description if you'd like to see that. I'm going to do it a little bit differently this time. I'm going to set up a soft synth to be my metronome this time. So to get that, I'm going to go over here to the Views menu. I'm going to go and open the Synth Rack view. That's going to open up this down over here on the bottom right. I'm going to hit the plus sign, and I'm going to insert a synth. I'm going to stick to things that come free with Cakewalk by BandLab. So the TTS-1 is one that comes free, and I'm just going to take the defaults and make a simple instrument track here. All right, I'm going to go ahead, and I need to make this a little bit bigger. I don't know why. There it goes. All right, so I want to go ahead and get my options here, and I'll come back to that in a moment as to what these options need to do. All right, so next thing is I need to go ahead and create the metronome for this, and I'm going to do that in the piano roll view, which is going to show up on the lower half of my screen. So in the views, I'm going to get the piano roll view right here. And I'm actually going to, bring that up a little bit, and I'll scroll down here so I get the soft synth in the window. So now one of the things you can do with the piano roll view is I can actually paint in notes with my pen right here, and I can audition things. So right now it's just piano sounds, and I obviously don't want a piano to be my metronome. So these are the next steps I have to take. For the channel on this synth, instead of channel none, I'm going to set it to channel 10, which is the default percussion channel in the general MIDI protocol. So now when I come down here, if I just hold my mouse button, I can audition all of the different available percussion sounds, and I can customize my metronome to whatever sounds I want. Here we go, and I'm going to use these two wood blocks. I'll use the high wood block for beat 1 and the low wood block for beat 2. So what I'm going to go ahead and do is double click right here. It didn't quite put it on beat 1, so I'm going to slide it back over. Beat 2, beat 3, beat 4, which again didn't quite go in the right spot. So I'm going to slide it on back over. All right, so now if I rewind to the beginning, I'm going to play this measure. And I have one bar full of metronome. Now those are all the same volume. So what I'm going to do in the lower half of the piano roll view is I can edit. I'm just going to click and drag. Oops, I had a note selected. There we go. Now that I didn't have a single note selected, I was able to click and drag. And so now I have a louder beat 1 and a softer beats 2, 3, and 4. One measure of that, all right? So that's a start. I'm going to go ahead, I can close up the piano roll view, drop this back down. Okay, next thing is I want to make sure that this clip is exactly one measure long, and this step is the same whether you're doing audio or MIDI. So I'm going to zoom in right here, Control right arrow zooms you in. And I'm going to grab this, and I'm just going to slide it back to exactly the end of the measure. That way when I loop this thing, it's going to loop accurately. If I leave the clip a little bit long, then my metronome is going to start not lining up with beat 1 after a little while. All right, so I've got one measure of metronome. I'm going to right-click on this, and I'm going to select Groove Clip Looping. And now that's ready to loop. I didn't look to see how many measures long Dragon Slayer is, but I'm just going to drag this on out to some distance. I'll double check in a little while, and I'll slide that outer into however many measures I actually need. W to rewind. I'm going to zoom back in, but now I have my metronome. And it's just going to go on for as long as I need it. That is the first step. Oh, and one more thing is it's convenient with a MIDI metronome compared to an audio metronome. Now, whenever I change tempos, an audio metronome loop is a little bit funny with tempo changes. To do it with a soft synth, there's no trouble. I can change it to any tempo I want, and it's just going to work perfectly. All right, so my next step is going to be getting my instrument tracks set up, and I'm going to start with a set of MIDI tracks to play along with, and then I'm going to replace those with live strings playing that I'm going to do. I've found that playing perfectly in tune in a setting like this where you're doing these one at a time overdubs is a lot harder than it seems like it ought to be, so I never want to play into something like this without a guide track. So I'm going to play in the parts via MIDI before I start doing any actual audio recording. So I'm going to put in 4 more instances of the TTS-1 synthesizer. So I'll expand this a little bit. Add 1, 2, 3, and 4. And I'm going to go ahead and start naming these things. So I'm going to name my metronome. Oops, I didn't spell that too good. There we go. I'll have the violin part. This piece actually does not have a unique second violin part, so there will only be one violin part. Viola, cello, and bass. So I'm just about to ready to start playing these things in as MIDI guide tracks. Now there is something I do want to point out about the metronome that I forgot. When I play this back, you'll notice that it's panned to the right, which you may not think that's a very big deal, but I prefer it as a mono metronome when I'm playing through headphones. I don't like to hear the metronome coming from one side or the other. So I'm going to get this into mono real quick, and I'll show you how to do that. I'm going to bring the piano roll back up here and rewind. Zoom this out and double click right here, and that brings me to the right track. There's my metronome. So I'm going to bring it back this way a little bit. All right, so what I'm going to do to get this into mono, I'm on, and you can see here that I'm E6 and F6. I'm going to open the control panel for the TTS-1 for this track by double clicking right here. It came up on my second screen, so I had to drag it back into the screen I'm recording. And I'm going to go to channel 10, and I want to edit those 2 notes to be centered rather than panned to the right. So on channel 10 is set to standard set, and I'm going to click my little button here, and I can scroll to all the different notes. If I click here, it's going to give me a list of all of the notes that are available. Now, it's kind of funny. E and F6 don't have keys assigned. Instead, those are on E5 and F5, and that's just a funny thing about MIDI. There are 2 different standards for numbering the keys, like which one is 1 and which one is 0, and sometimes they don't line up. So it looks like they used one standard to program the piano roll view and a different standard to program their soft synth, but it's just something to be aware of. So I'm going to open E5, and here in the pan field, I'm going to double click and enter a 0, which is center pan. And I'm going to the low wood block. I'm going to double click and enter a 0 for center pan. I'm going to click OK, and I'm going to close this all out. And now when I play it back, you can see here that the meters are showing it the same in the left and the right. So that's just something I prefer to listen to it that way. All right, so I'm going to save my project, and I'm going to go ahead and play in these guide parts, and then I'll be back. All right, so I've gone and played in the parts for my piece on a MIDI keyboard. A couple of things that I want to show you is that up here I turned off the metronome during record feature because I wanted to listen to the metronome that I created, because this will be there in the final audio file where this metronome would not be. So I turned that off, and I've got to now clean these up a little bit. So I am not a very good piano player. Although this is a pretty easy song, it still doesn't quite line up perfectly. So I've already fixed up the violin and the cello parts, but I've left the viola part to go through the steps with you. All right, so here's the steps for getting the viola part cleaned up. The first one is that I find the staff view the easiest one to deal with this here. So I'm going to go ahead and open up the staff view. I'm going to bring it up here, and I want the viola track available in the top half of my screen and the staff view here in the bottom. Now, I will say that for recording this, I'm doing this all on one screen, but I have two monitors, and I will usually put the bottom half of the screen on one monitor and the top half of the screen on another monitor, and I find that is a little bit easier for workflow. But anyway, so when the staff view first comes up, it's just going to have whatever track you have selected over here, but I want to go ahead and get all my tracks. So I'm going to go ahead here and pick tracks. This comes up, and I'm just going to click and drag across all of my parts. And that gives me my full staff view. Now you can see here that the violin part looks correct. The cello part looks correct. The viola part looks like a mess, because even though I was playing with a metronome, apparently I wasn't exactly perfectly in time. Even though I was pretty close, I'm a little bit off here. I came a little bit early, etc., etc. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and get that fixed. So I'm going to come up here. I'm going to highlight the viola clip, and that's just going to go ahead and highlight every note. I'm going to press the Q button for quantize. Check your duration. So this goes down to eighth notes. I'm going to have this set at eighth notes. I think it initially pops up to 16ths because it detects some 16th notes in my playing, even though those were inadvertent. So I'm going to set that. So I want to quantize to eighth notes, and I'm going to hit OK. And check it out. It moves everything so that it is exactly on the beat. Now the next thing is, I know when I was recording this viola part, I had a couple of things that just weren't quite right. So I'm always going to go through and listen just to make sure that I got it right. And I'm going to show you a couple of things as we listen through to this viola part. And you know what? I'm going to start that over here real quick because I forgot to mute the other parts. So I just want to listen to the viola part by itself. So I'll mute the violin, I'll mute the cello, and I'll be left with the metronome and the viola. And if you come over here on the console, I can, with this slider here, control the volume of my metronome, so it's only loud enough that I can hear it, but not so loud that it's getting in the way. So I'll come back here to the staff, and here we're going to listen to the viola part. All right, I'm going to stop it here because I'm missing a note right here. I'm missing that F sharp. Now, something about the staff view is a normal left click adds notes. I'm going to undo that. So you have to do some right clicking here. I want an F sharp right here. And that put me in an F natural. So I'm going to undo that. So sometimes the staff view is not the best place. So I'm actually going to right click, drag, highlight this note. I'm going to click up here to bring my time ruler over here, and I'm going to jump back over to the piano roll view to fix that F sharp. Now you'll notice over here I've got my track picker, which I didn't have earlier. I'll show you this little arrow right here. Opens and closes your track picker. So I'm going to pick my viola track, and now right here I'm going to double click myself an F sharp in there. There we go. So now I have an F sharp. I'm going to come back over to the staff view, and you can see that it updates over here. All right. And so this all looks pretty good, but you can see over here in this measure that I have a mistake in the viola part. And I'm going to figure out where I am, because the other thing you may notice is I started the recording in measure 16 because I'm going to record some verbal instructions here at the beginning. And I'm not sure how long that's going to take. So I'll move these other tracks into place once I've done recording my instructions. So I'm going to come over here to this measure, and it should be E, F, G, E in quarter notes. All right, so I'm going to come back over here because it's just easier to manipulate in the piano roll view. So I've got E. So I'm going to just shorten up my G. I'm going to expand my F sharp. And so now I should have it. Now you'll notice I'm not clean on my releases right here. So if I wanted to, I could clean up the overhang, but generally speaking, you don't really notice that when you listen to it. But if you're looking at the notation, it does kind of show up here, right? So this E isn't really going over to where that F sharp is. What you're really seeing is that I just didn't quite release the key. So if you want to bother with it, you can edit that back a little bit, and now that's going to display correctly. I didn't bother to fix it in the violin part because if you're just listening to this as a guide track, you're not going to really notice it. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and keep listening here to see what other mistakes I find. Four measures of rest, and back over here again. I'm not going to worry about that extra quarter note hanging out over there. You don't really notice it when you're listening, so I don't need to bother fixing it. All right, I'm going to stop right here. I have F sharp and G when that really should have been E and G. So I'm going to bring this here. I'm going to come over here, and I'm just going to drag these F sharps on down to, oops, I dragged them to F naturals. I'm going to try that again, all the way down to E. Now, you could do a right-click drag and select those all together. And now you can drag them all at once, just so you can see how to do that. And now you can see right here that's fixed. So we're going to keep listening to the end. All right, and so there it is. I have a quantized and repaired viola part. All right, so now I'm going to go back to the beginning, and we're going to deal with the bass part. So let me bring that a little bit further down. And you may have also noticed my viola part is in treble clef. We'll fix that here in a minute. I'll show you how to fix that. Put that in alto clef how it ought to be, but we'll fix that at the same time as we do the bass, because you may have noticed that the bass is also in treble clef by default. So we'll fix that here in a minute. So in this song, the bass and the cello are the same part. They're in unison, but they're an octave apart. So I want to go ahead and represent that octave. So I'm going to just copy the cello into the bass, and we're going to transpose it. So I'm going to select this track. If you did it in multiple takes, then you may have to select the whole thing. But since I just did one take and then went back and fixed things, I can just select the one thing and it gets all of it. When you hold the shift key and drag, it constrains you by time. So I want to keep this right on time. So I'm holding the shift key and dragging it down to the bass track. And if you hold the control key, then it gives you copy. So I'm holding shift and control and dragging that into the bass. And it asks me how I want to drag and drop. And now I have the cello part copied into the bass part. And you can see that it's showed up down here, albeit in treble clef. So why don't we go ahead and fix that? I'm going to right click on the staff and I'm going to pick layout. And now you got to make sure you select the correct track. You can see right here it tells you what clef. So for the viola track, I'm going to change that to alto clef. For the bass track, I want to switch that to octave bass because that'll put it with the right transposition. And I'm going to go ahead and close this, and you can see down here, viola part is now in alto clef, bass part is an octave off. Oh, no, it's not. The bass part is now correct, but I do still need to transpose it. I haven't transposed it yet. All right, so we've got to put that in the right register. I'm going to come up here, select its clip here. You see that highlights all the notes. Up here is process, transpose, and you're going to want to go down 12 half steps. You can select diatonic math and go down 7, but then it thinks I'm in the key of C major, and I haven't set the key on this, so my Fs don't stay sharp. So I want to use 12 half steps. Now I'll click OK, and now the bass part is correctly down an octave. So at this point, I have all of my MIDI parts, and I'm ready to go ahead and overdub my own string playing. And so I'm going to go ahead and stop this video here, and I'll do another one when I'm ready to deal with my own string parts. But at this point, you could, if you're confident in your student's ability to play along with the MIDI tracks, send this on out and have them play along with it. But I find that it's easier for people to match up to instruments that sound like theirs. So here's the end of this installment, and like I said, I'll be back with the next installment of preparing my guide tracks. Hope this has been helpful for you. If you found this helpful, please remember to like the video and subscribe to my channel. Thank you.